Boldwood presents Fatal Lies, written by Anita Waller and read by Richard Burnip. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. 3 things cannot long be hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. Confucius. Chapter 1. Monday, 24th of October, 2022. Carol Flynn stared up at the facade of the Forrester Detective Agency and gave a slight nod of her head. Over the previous few weeks, she'd watched men coming and going, carrying wood and anything else they needed to turn what had been a detective agency for several years into an upmarket detective agency for the future. She had got to know Dave Forrester and Johnny Keane through seeing them around the area, and had wondered what would happen to the business after their untimely deaths. Everyone in the locality had been stunned by it, and flowers had covered the front of the shop as people arrived to pay their respects. Today she was not only here to pay her respects, but she was also here to tell the new partners that they needed her. The new sign shouting loud and proud that it was the Forrester Detective Agency had been put in place at the end of the previous week, and she looked up at it. It was smart, to the point, and no frills. On the right-hand window was a notice that said, "Under new management," and she stepped forward with confidence to go in the front door. Once inside the compact entrance, 3 doors faced her. The one to the left said, Matt Forrester. The one to the right said, Steve Rowlands. She liked that, the use of shortened versions of their true names. The one immediately facing her said, Reception. And there was a man fitting a sliding window into the wall by the side of the door. She walked up to the man. "Is Mr. Forrester around?" He pointed with a chisel and said, "He's in his office, just knock and wait. He'll pop out and get you unless he's on the phone." He carried on lining up the glass panel, and she moved to the door he had indicated. She took a deep breath and knocked. It was opened by a child, who looked her up and down and said, "Hi, you want my dad?" "Probably," she said with a smile. "Is he in?" "Oh, that's what he said he needed anyway. Come in." The boy held the door open for her, just as the door at the other end of the office opened. Matt Forrester walked through, carrying a cafetiere and a mug. He saw a lady who he felt he knew, but couldn't place where he had seen her before. "Sorry," he apologized. He placed the drink on his desk and held out his hand. "Matt Forrester, can I help you?" "Oh, and my assistant here is Harry, my son. Half-term break," he said, in explanation. She took his hand, in her much tinier hand, and shook it. "I'm hoping that you can." "Please," Matt said, feeling a little flustered. "Take a seat. Can I get another cup and offer you a coffee?" "No, I'm good, thanks. I had one just before I came across." "Across?" "I live over there, the house with the blue-painted walls. My husband was a Wednesday fan." He waited, taking in her appearance. He would guess around 40 years old, but he would freely admit to being useless at guessing women's ages. She was slim, had on a navy blue suit that had clearly cost more than she would have paid at Primark, and a smile that wasn't forced. "My name is Carol Flynn. I was an acquaintance of your dad and Johnny. Dropped the occasional box of scones in for them, that sort of thing." Matt's eyes lit up. "You're the scone lady." "I am indeed. I miss both men very much. My husband did running repairs to your dad's wheelchair when they were necessary, and they always waved when I passed by the window." He waited. This wasn't why she had ventured inside. Something else was on her mind. Do you have a problem I can help with? Kind of. Again she smiled. My husband was 20 years older than me and in poor health. He caught COVID 6 months ago and was gone in less than a week. His body wasn't strong enough to fight it. I wound up his affairs fairly quickly, considering there was a lifetime to go through, and although I don't need to work, I want to work. She handed a plastic sleeve containing a printed piece of A4 paper across to him. I think you need a receptionist. I have only seen you and Mr. Rowlands actually working here. I'm not asking for favours. I've always done reception and secretarial duties, both in recent years and earlier in my working life, when I worked for a solicitor. This is my CV. She tapped the plastic sleeve, and all I ask is you read it. Working here would mean no costs for getting to work, that's for sure. And is mind reading one of your skills? Matt picked up his cup and sipped at the coffee he'd been pouring. Don't think so, but I can work on it, she confirmed, her tone serious. He spun his laptop around so she could see the screen. I was putting together an advert for a receptionist and was about to send it to an agency. She glanced at it. Don't use that agency, they treat their staff badly. I can tell you at least 3 that are much better, and you've spelt negotiate incorrectly. It doesn't have 2 G's. She stood. I won't trouble you any further. All I ask is that you read my CV before you contact an agency, a different agency to that one. Thank you for your time, Mr. Forrester. It's been a pleasure to finally meet you and speak with you. Your dad didn't half love you and your sister. He was so proud of you both. She's nice, Harry said, peering through the blinds he was holding to one side. Come away from the window, monkey. I liked her as well. I'll discuss it with Steve when he gets back, but I think it's possible we may have found our receptionist without even having to look. Will she bring us scones? Matt laughed. I saw your eyes light up when she said that. I don't think she will if she starts working for us. So you liked her? Harry nodded. She was polite, wasn't she? Like Mum is, and Karen, and Auntie Herms. I'd better give her the job on the strength of that little lot then, hadn't I? He ruffled Harry's hair. So, Harry boy, I've got you for a full week. I'll try to keep parts of it free for us to go places, but if you've got anything special you want to do, just shout up. Will I ever be able to live with you and Karen all the time? He asked. Matt froze. Why? I don't like him. Dickhead. Sorry, Brian. He's okay with you, though. And don't call him Dickhead. He's a superintendent, and the title is worth some respect. He didn't complete the sentence with, even if he isn't. He's nothing with me, and he's nothing to me. Not sure what you mean, Harry. What I say. He doesn't talk to me, and now Mum's having a little girl, I'm well out of it. He sometimes drops me off at school, but only if it fits in with what he's doing. It was him who persuaded Mum to let me come here for the week, but it was only to get me out of his hair. Or could it be because your mum is struggling to sleep at the moment and is exhausted? In answer to your question, I don't see her ever. But you're getting older, Harry, and one day you can make your own decision on that. Can we leave it like that for the moment? And now I'm not in the police. I'm only ever a phone call away, day or night. Now don't let me catch you calling Superintendent Brian Davis a dickhead again, especially in front of your mum. Harry grinned. I don't, but nobody can stop me thinking it. The sound of the office door opening and closing, followed by the sound of a second opening and closing, told them Steve was back, and Harry went in to bring him through to his dad's office. He told Steve about his interesting 15 minutes or so, and handed Steve the CV. Steve read it through, then read it again. Have you looked at this? No, she's only been gone 5 minutes, and Harry insisted on talking to me. Is she good? You've let her go without making her sign a contract? Steve's voice was incredulous. "Seriously? This woman is our Mary Poppins. She's exactly what we need. Just going by this document. What's she like?" "She's lovely, Uncle Steve. She makes scones." Harry grinned again, enjoying watching the interaction between the two men. Steve turned his eyes back to Matt. "She makes scones as well. And according to this, she only lives 30 seconds away." 30 seconds across a main road and 2 sets of tram tracks. Steve laughed. "I should imagine the last 20-odd years have taught her how to cross that road without getting squashed under a tram. I suggest you read through this, see what I'm seeing with the skills and experience, then risk your life on the tram tracks and go get her signed up. See if she can start tomorrow. We need help sorting out what goes where, now all the building work is done, and Herms hasn't got time to help us." Look, for what it's worth, I really liked her. And if it had been my decision alone, I would have offered her the job there and then. She even caught a spelling error in the job ad I drafted. Keep your eye on Harry and I'll nip over and see her. I'll make us sound like two hopeless idiots who don't know what they're doing. Then maybe it will persuade her to start tomorrow morning. I need to offer her a salary. What sort of figure are we looking at? If she's as good as this CV would lead me to believe, you need to start at 30k and see what she says. That'd be for full time, though. It depends what hours she'll be working. You want me to come with you? Matt shook his head. No, I'll ring if we need to have an agreement on anything. He spent a couple of minutes reading through the CV, with Steve pointing his fingers at various sections of it. I'll be back shortly. We could be being a bit optimistic at 30k, and I hope to God I don't call her Mary now you've said she'll be our Mary Poppins. He walked outside, waited on the curb until a tram had fully rattled past, then ran across towards the blue-painted house. She opened the door as he walked up the path. You've read it, then? She asked. He nodded. We need you. I'm here to negotiate your salary, no matter how many G's are in the word. Chapter 2. Monday, 24th of October. Carol Flynn smiled as she stood at her window watching her new employer running back across the tram tracks. She knew she would enjoy getting to know him, and definitely enjoy working for him. The discussion about her salary had been quite funny. She had said, "Don't pay me for a month and then we'll talk," and he had said he daren't go back to the office without a contract being signed. She asked if he had brought the contract, and his sheepish expression had said it all. The agreement ended up being that she would type up the document as her first job the following day, she would work for free until the beginning of December, and then they would discuss her salary again. He had vaguely waved his arm in the air when admitting they'd not actually employed anybody before at the agency. He had been a DI in the police until the murder of his father pushed him into leaving and taking on Dave Forrester's existing business, and while Steve, his partner in the agency, had employed people, he also employed a part-time accounts lady to see to his wages and everything connected with that, for his landscape gardening company that was currently taking a bit of a back seat. "Leave it to me," she said. "I'll be there for 9 tomorrow, but I'll adjust the hours accordingly when I see how I need to manage the job. Is that okay with you?" "Carol, I've seen your CV. I've seen who you've worked for, particularly the last employer, and whatever you say is fine by me. I'll make sure I'm there early, but today I'm going to get you a set of keys cut. I'll show you where all the security cameras are, explain the alarm code setting, which is being installed as we speak, that sort of thing. Steve and I are both very much hands-on with the business. If we have to go out, we tell each other. But more than that, we use a handwritten diary that stays on my desk. Just a bit of security for the two of us that Hermia insisted we get. We got into a bit of bother when we investigated the deaths of Dad and Johnny, and as Steve is her partner, we have to do as she says, or else. That's what sisters are for." And he had gathered up the bits and bobs he had brought. She turned away from the window after watching him run across the tram tracks and then the road, deciding her first job would be to tell him there was a traffic-controlled crossing not 25 yards from her front door, and maybe he should think about using it. Harry and Steve were waiting for Matt in Steve's office, their faces expectant.
"She said yes?"
Steve asked.
"Mary Poppins will bring her own umbrella," Matt grinned. "I reckon we're lucky to have dropped on her at this point in our business development." "She dropped on us," Steve pointed out. "We didn't choose her, she chose us. And she's definitely getting more like Mary Poppins every time we speak. She chose her employer, didn't she?"
"Mr. Banks. Mr. George Banks," Harry said helpfully.
"Thank you, Harry," Steve said, "but you don't get paid for being our resident expert on Mary Poppins. Unless we actually need an expert on Mary Poppins, that is."
They all turned at the sound of tapping on the large front window, and Harry, being nearest to it, pushed aside one of the vertical blinds. "Karen!" he yelled, and went to press the newly installed door release to let her in. DS Karen Nelson was as big a favourite with Harry as she was with his dad. Huge steps had been taken in Matt and Karen's fledgling relationship over the previous 6 months, and now, with the sale of Karen's home she had shared with her ex-husband, they had created a more solid footing and moved in together at Matt's home. Matt kissed her cheek in greeting.
"How did you know to knock on Steve's window?"
"I'm a detective."
"OK, that's a good enough answer." He grinned at her. "You called in for a cuppa?"
She shook her head. "No, much simpler than that. I'm taking 5 minutes out. I actually wanted to chat, but it's about a case, so I'll wait till after a certain young man has gone to bed."
Steve stood. "I'll take Harry with me. We've got a big job on at Bradway, and I want to check it's all going as well as they keep reporting it is. Besides, it doesn't hurt them to see the big boss turn up occasionally. Grab your coat, Harry, and a football. This house is next door to a public field, so we can grab half an hour's kickabout."
"Don't damage Uncle Steve," Matt warned his son, and led Karen through to his own office. He carried on into the kitchen and switched on the kettle, despite his earlier offer having been refused. She smiled at him. "You know me so well, Matt."
"I know that sometimes you say no when you really mean yes, please," he said, winking at her.
"Cheeky." She shook her head. "Not really. Because we've got 1 or 2 off with COVID, I had to go to a burglary site. I wouldn't normally do that, I'd send uniform, but as I said, we're short-staffed. I brought Ray Ledger, but he's gone back to write up the reports, so I thought I'd come here, wash my hand," she waved her wrist about, "and tell you my concerns about this case, and also to say how chuffed I am that Ray Ledger, Jamie Hanover and Ian Jameson are properly on my team as DCs promoted from PCs, and all on merit after their work on your dad's murder and the Anthony Dawson murder." Matt headed to the kitchen as he heard the kettle switch off, and then turned back.
"They all deserved the promotion to major crimes. Wash your hand?"
She held her right hand out towards him.
"That's blood."
"It's my own."
"Thank heavens for that. What have you done?"
"There was a lot of glass, and I fell over an iron."
"An iron?"
"A plastic child's iron. I saw it at the last minute, but I stepped on it, and it broke. I catapulted forward and saved myself by putting my hand on the windowsill. The glass from the broken window was everywhere, and now my blood is too. I've confessed to forensics, showed them the part that is all me, and they laughed. Amateur, they called me. But I actually think I might need a dressing on it, and I happen to know you've got a super-duper first aid box here. You do, don't you?" He grinned at her.
"It might have a plaster in it. Let me get the tea made and we'll clean the cut. Don't bleed on the carpet."
"You're all heart, Matt Forrester." With the cut cleansed until a germ wouldn't dare trespass anywhere near it, and a large pink plaster protecting it, Karen sat back with a sigh. "That's much better. It was actually quite painful, but if I'd confessed to that, I'd have been known as Wimpy Karen for the rest of my police life.
And what about the iron?
I've promised the little girl I'll get her a new one. The bloody burglars had tipped her toy box over and scattered stuff everywhere. But the mother knew better than to move anything until we arrived, hence my size 5s landed on a plastic iron. She took a sip of tea. So the house is about 10 properties from here, along this little service road. The mum and her 2 kids went to her brother's house for a meal last night, but both kids fell asleep, so all 3 of them ended up staying. When they arrived home this morning, the front window had been smashed, the front door left open, and inside was, well, I suppose you'd say wrecked. She rang us to say she thought they might still be inside because she could see her television still on the wall and the front door was open, so we were with her within about 6 minutes. There was glass everywhere. It was a dangerous environment for the 2 little ones. Her brother's been and collected them, got them safely out of the way, and the lady herself is quite calm and composed.
Really?
That's for our benefit. I know she's seen some CCTV from next door's camera, and I think she's recognised somebody. It was a couple of thugs, teenage thugs, just learning their trade, I reckon. Didn't have a car unless it was parked round the corner, though they didn't look old enough to be driving. It happened about 9 last night. They took a television, about 15 years old, but left the brand new one on the wall in the lounge. Left a laptop upstairs in the main bedroom, that sort of thing. They took her jewellery box, but she says that's no great loss. It was just costume jewellery that the little one played with.
And you think she'll go after them herself?
Karen nodded. I do. I've tried to warn her off doing that, explained they might only be teenagers, but their families will back them in every way, and it could be a dangerous game she's playing no matter what they've done. I'm going to have a closer look at them when I get the CCTV transferred to our system and hopefully enhanced. I kind of thought I knew one of them, but I can't give a name yet.
You want me to take a look?
I'll download it to a stick and bring it home with me tonight, then nobody will realise I'm showing it to you. 2 heads are probably going to be much better than 1. The victim is called Elise Langton, lives at number 83. Karen replaced her cup on the desk. I'm calling round at Smith's before I go back into the station. I need to buy a plastic iron. Matt stood and moved round the desk to take her into his arms.
Take care, drive carefully, etc., etc.
Oh, and remind me to fill you in on our new receptionist tonight. You'll be impressed. I am impressed already. You hadn't even contacted an agency when we left this morning. He laughed. Fate intervened. Big style. He kissed her, and she left him with a small wave and a huge smile. He watched as she drove away, then picked up his phone.
You still at Bradway? Yep. You need us. The job's fine, but we've not even kicked a ball yet.
Tell Harry you have to come back for work, but I want us to go for a walk when you do get back. Harry can come with us.
Problem?
Stolen goods type of problem. I'll explain when you get here. Harry grumbled most of the way back, and Steve had to promise him a game of football for the following day, with the proviso that it wasn't raining. What's Dad want, anyway?
You're not going to believe this, but...
Dad? Walking? Harry sounded shocked. I thought he went everywhere in the car.
Well, it just goes to show you don't know your dad as well as you think you do. Although, now you mention it, I thought he went everywhere in the car as well.
They laughed, fist bumped at their agreement on Matt's walking attitudes, and Steve put on his indicators to pull onto the forecourt of their office.
Safely delivered, he said.
We'd best get inside and find out what he wants us to do on this walk. Could be an interesting evening, this one. Reckon he'll buy me a bag of chips?
He will if we steer him towards Base Green shops. You know he can't resist the smell if we walk past the chippy down there.
OK, let's see what his plans for us are then. Harry opened the passenger door, ready to negotiate the planned walking route. Chapter 3. Monday, 24th of October. Elise Langton was quietly angry. She hadn't shown it in front of Jack Mitchell, her brother, because she knew he would insist on her returning with them instead of staying in her home, and she had things to organise. She needed all the locks changing because the little bastards had taken a set of keys from the kitchen, and she needed to get the window boarded up, with arrangements made to have the glass replaced. And she needed to get on Facebook and start naming names. Her time as a social worker had left her with a memory of kids who would develop into criminals in future years, and she thought she had recognised one of them on the CCTV video. She wanted to let the brain-dead morons know that she knew who they were, and they'd picked on the wrong person. Forensics had found nothing. Apparently shows like Vera and CSI had taught the criminal fraternity all about wearing gloves, covering hair with a hat, and wearing black clothes. These two obviously hadn't learnt enough about CCTV, though. She escorted the forensic people to the door and thanked them for their trouble, and they said she could begin to put her home back together. She began with 3-year-old Sky's toys, scrubbing out the toy box with bleach just in case they'd touched it, then shaking and washing each toy, making sure there was no glass caught up anywhere in them. When all the toys except the broken iron were back in the box, she carried it into the kitchen. Apart from the bunch of keys which had been in a bowl on the work surface, the thieves didn't appear to have taken or done anything else in there, so she stacked things as she cleaned them on the kitchen table. 6-year-old Daniel had been furious, but a little bewildered that they hadn't taken the cables that went with it. And she realised he had been even more angry that they'd taken his Minecraft disc that had been in the machine. He'd spent months reaching a high level on it. Elise had blocked the machine within minutes of discovering it had gone, and she hoped that had worked. Most of his toys and games had been in his bedroom, and it appeared that the burglars hadn't bothered with the rooms that were clearly for kids. But her own bedroom had been trashed beyond all recognition. Tonight she would be sleeping on the sofa in the lounge. Tomorrow was soon enough to begin the big clean-up in that room. They'd taken her old television and the jewellery box she had owned since she was a child, but there was nothing of any significant value inside it. Sky loved to play with it, dangling odd earrings from her ears, wearing multiple strands of beads and chains around her neck, but Elise knew the value was zero. Her wedding and engagement rings that had been removed from her finger and taped inside her Bible, as soon as she had ordered Rick out of her life, were safe. She had had some vague thought in her head that burglars wouldn't consider a Bible worth stealing. Thankfully, she had been right on that one. With the lounge looking quite bare, and the kitchen table full to overflowing, Elise began to sweep up the glass. She didn't want to wreck her vacuum cleaner by scrunching over it, so patiently swept and tipped it, shovelful by shovelful, into a cardboard box. It was only when she couldn't see any remaining glass that she got out the vacuum cleaner and hoovered the entire house, except for her bedroom. That was for another day. But at least she could get her children home the next day and know they would be safe from cutting themselves. The window took half an hour for her neighbour to board up, and after he refused to take anything for doing it, she handed him a 6-pack of lager. "Happy to help out," Malcolm said. "And I'd got the stuff I needed in the shed anyway. I'll measure up properly for the glass tomorrow, and you'll be back to normal within a couple of days. You contacted a locksmith?" Elise nodded. "Coming tomorrow. Early." "Have you told Rick?" She shook her head. "Not yet. You know what he's like. He'll cause uproar trying to find out who's done it, and I can't handle that at the moment. Let's give the police a chance to make the arrests before Rick gets to them." Malcolm laughed. "Then let's hope he doesn't hear any Chinese whispers about this,
because he'll be round here causing merry hell. And if he gets sight of my CCTV...
Elise sighed.
He might. Please don't let him know your camera was working and caught them.
He stared at her.
You know who they are, don't you?
I think so.
And take care how you deal with it, Elise. You've two kiddies to think about. Just tell the police their names and let them do their job.
Matt, Steve and Harry made sure they were protected against the cold of the night air before setting off down Seagrave Avenue, looking in front gardens using torches, the whole time checking Harry was with one or the other. They concentrated on houses that were in darkness, and while they were shining torches at one such home, a man came out of the front door of the adjoining house.
You lost something?
Matt approached him, holding up his ID.
Matt Forrester, from the Forrester Detective Agency at the top of the hill. We're looking into a burglary that happened last night, and we think they may have hidden some items to collect later. Just taking an hour or so to have a look in the locality, just in case.
The man checked the ID, then nodded.
Charlie Anson. You looked down the side of this house yet?
Matt shook his head.
My partner's heading down the side now. There's a television with a black bag over it, stashed behind a wheelie bin.
As the men finished speaking, they heard Harry call out, "Dad, we need you." Matt and Charlie moved to where Harry and Steve were, and all four of them looked at the television.
Not the brightest of burglars, are they? Charlie said.
I'll lay odds on them being bright enough to keep gloves on, Matt said. I'll ring DS Nelson and tell her what we've found. She'll send somebody round to pick it up. Let's have a look round and see if they've dumped anything else, like the PS4 or the jewellery box.
The owners of this house are in Spain at the moment, Charlie said. They'll be sorry they've missed all of this. I've been keeping an eye on things for them. That's why I knew the television had been put there after their departure.
On the plus side, Matt said, this wouldn't have been dumped here if they'd thought the house wasn't empty. It must have been in complete darkness for them to stash it here. They probably know the homeowners aren't home and obviously think there's no rush to pick it up, so they're going to be pretty pissed off when they do turn up and it's gone. When Matt called her, Karen answered her phone immediately and listened as he explained what was going on. Tell me what you want to do. Can you hang on there until I get the forensics people out to pick up the television? I'll tell them to be quick. They might just get a fingerprint off it, but there's no point getting surveillance. And Matt, thank you. He smiled as she disconnected. She's sending somebody from forensics to pick it up, he explained. I suggest you two go and buy a bag of chips and head off home, and I'll wait here until it's been collected. That okay? Steve and Harry laughed, gave him the thumbs up, and began to walk up the road, heading back to the office to collect Steve's car. The elderly neighbour looked at Matt. You're Dave Forrester's lad. I am. You knew my dad? Everybody round here knew your dad. It's a privilege to meet you. Thank you. I miss him. And he's why we've done this walk around tonight. It's what he would have done, albeit in a wheelchair. He could see into the minds of criminals, almost second-guess them, and I try to emulate that. I'm just not as successful as he was, but we'll get there. I'll wait with you until your mates arrive to take this away. He indicated the television set. I'll go and get the missus to make us a cup of tea. It's a bit chilly out tonight. Within 5 minutes, Charlie was back with 2 cups of tea and a packet of ginger biscuits in his coat pocket. The missus says I can have 2 and you can have as many as you want. She's a star, Matt said, rubbing his hands together to warm them before wrapping them around the cup. But I'll not tell her if you have more than 2. Charlie looked down. She'll know. She'll know. The 2 men sat on the front garden wall and sipped at their drinks, dunking ginger biscuits. Is there a reason she limits your biscuit consumption, then? Aye.
My bloody doctor told her I'd got diabetes and she needed to change my diet. And have you? Got diabetes, I mean? Aye, I have. And she checks everything before I have it. He fished in the packet for a biscuit. That's the fourth one you've had. Yes, but the last two don't count. Why not? Matt was enjoying the company of this man. I'll tell her you had them. You were starving because you've had nought to eat since lunchtime. Which happens to be true. If we hadn't found this television, I was on the promise of a bag of chips from the chippy. Well, there you are then. You needed a couple of extra ginger biscuits to keep you going. Charlie sipped at his cup of tea and smiled. There's always a way round things, lad. You just have to look for 'em where women are concerned. They're a lot smarter than we are. Think I don't know that. That DS I rang earlier, she's my life partner, proper smart cookie. I've also got a sister, more brains in her big toe than I have in my entire body. That's right. You know her? I met her once. Your dad introduced me to her. Beautiful lady. Certainly is. She lives with Steve, the fella who's gone off with my son to get a bag of chips before they go home and pretend they've had nothing to eat. So, you've got two smart women keeping an eye on you. Don't know how you cope. I've enough with one. He reached for another biscuit. Am I eating that one as well? Matt asked. Afraid so. You really are hungry, aren't you? Obviously. He picked up the packet of biscuits, now much depleted, and twisted the top of it until it resealed the pack. Charlie watched him, then smiled. Think I'll get supper-time biscuits tonight, then? Doubt it. As you said, your wife's a lot smarter than you, and she will know exactly how many you had. Plus, your CCTV camera is pointing at this stretch of road. Matt suddenly realised what he'd said. CCTV, for fuck's sake. You have CCTV, does it work? Think so. Our son put it in about a year ago, but we've never had to check on it. It's linked to the wife's phone. Just don't touch it. I'll get somebody out first thing in the morning, and they'll download the previous 36 hours or so. No problem, lad. I'm always up early. So, she could have been watching me scoffing all these biscuits? Yep. Bugger. That's no chocolate for me for a month, then. The small forensics van pulled up to the curb, and Matt and Charlie stood. The two men shook hands, and Charlie collected up the cups and what remained of the biscuits. Been good chatting to you, Matt. Hope you catch the little bastards. Chapter 4. Tuesday, 25th of October. Karen verified the two lads caught on the Ansons' CCTV were the same two lads seen at Elise Langton's neighbour's property, and asked that files be checked to try to come up with names. The television had fingerprints all over it, but it had been confirmed they belonged to Elise and her children, so Karen picked up the iron in its pretty gift bag and headed down to her car. 10 minutes later she was outside the Langton home, waving at the little girl's face, peering at her through the bay window. Elise opened the door and ushered her in. You have news? Kind of, but first of all I have a new iron for Miss Skye, to say sorry for standing on yours, sweetheart. Skye smiled shyly. She squealed in delight when she saw the sparkly new iron. It was much nicer than the one the lady had trodden on. She ran to the kitchen to get her ironing board, then returned to collect some tea towels that she thought desperately needed ironing. Elise laughed. That'll keep her busy until my brother comes to collect her. He's taking both kids for the day so I can sort out the bedroom. Skye irons absolutely everything. Bet that changes as she gets older. So you have news? It's not a lot, but it's a start. I just want to explain something about burglaries. There really are only two kinds.
One is planned meticulously, where the thief knows exactly what is inside the property, where it is, and the likelihood of people being in the house. The other sort is the opportunistic thief. They usually work in twos, go out for a supposed walk, and look for houses that are in darkness. Elise nodded. I always leave a light on and my curtains closed if we're going to be out for the night. But I didn't know that was going to happen. We were only going over to Jack and Pippa's for a meal, but both kids fell asleep, so Pippa suggested we stayed. This house was in darkness and the curtains were open, letting them see nobody was inside. Karen nodded. They were definitely the opportunistic type. That's why it was all so rushed. They took the TV from upstairs, but they didn't have transport, so couldn't manage the even bigger one that's on your wall. They left the PS4 cables still plugged in at the wall and they missed the laptop altogether. They probably imagined they'd got a fair haul in the jewellery box, but even with that they'll get nothing for it. Then last night we had a bit of a breakthrough in that the people who own the Forrester Detective Agency went for a walk around the nearby area to see if these particular little scroats had behaved as all little scroats behave with stolen goods that are too big to carry. They hide them to collect later. And they found your television hidden behind a wheelie bin. We collected it last night. They were caught once again on CCTV, and it is the same pair. So we've tested for fingerprints, but there's only yours and some little ones, so that doesn't help. We'll get it back to you as soon as we can. You know who they are? Karen hesitated. I feel as if I do. I'm going back to the office now and I'm going to look through some photographs, see if anything jogs my memory a bit further. I intended doing it last night, but we had to deal with getting that telly back to the station and logged into forensics. But you know them, don't you? Elise shrugged. Maybe. I'm not 100% sure, but maybe. I'll let you know as soon as I find out for definite. There was a warning note in Karen's voice. Do not take matters into your own hands. You've two kids to think about, and they could easily get hurt, as could you. Whoever these lads are, they're probably from one or two of the criminal families, and they're learning their trade. But it's their families who are the problem. They'll think nothing of a sharp knife in your neck or a baseball bat smashing your kneecaps to smithereens. Leave the rough stuff to us, and if you do feel you can tell me who you think they are, I promise I'll follow it up. It won't be left in my in-tray. Carol Flynn proved to be just as good at crossing tram tracks as she was a receptionist. She had watched for the arrival of a car carrying somebody who looked as though they belonged in the agency, then moved at speed across the road to begin what she hoped would be the last job she would ever need or want. And the need was social rather than financial. She was a woman who needed to be needed. Matt and Steve arrived together, and as she stood behind them, they both turned. Good morning. Matt's smile was huge. I'm glad you've arrived. At 4 this morning, I had a fear that it had all been a dream, and I still had to find a receptionist. I'm real, and I'm here, she said, leading the way into the office, ushered in by both men. And don't be on your best behaviour on my account. I'm here to be part of the team. Good. Shall we start with a cuppa made in our new coffee machine? Can do, she agreed. I haven't had a chance to orientate myself yet, but I'm assuming I can access the kitchen from my office. You can. We all can, because now the kitchen kind of runs along the back of the building, and our offices are built in front of it. Yours is slightly smaller than ours to facilitate this little vestibule where people can enter, then ring the bell for you to deal with their problem. We initially tried to sort it out without major changes from the way Dad had it, but then we decided to just go for it and reconfigure the whole of the downstairs. There are now 2 access points to the upstairs flat. The first is via that little door on the outside of the shop. Dad had a lift to transport him and his wheelchair up there, but we don't need it, so we've removed it. And the second entry is the door in the kitchen, which takes you to a flight of stairs. Upstairs is sort of a large filing system, really. We've used Johnny's old bedroom for storing all his files,
And there's a separate filing cabinet for ours. In theory, it could still be used as a flat with external access. When we removed the lift, with a degree of sadness, it gave us considerably more space.
OK, I'll begin by getting us all a drink.
No, he's decided to spend the day with Auntie Hermia. She booked a day off work for what she hopes will be her discharge from the hospital, all mended and put back together. Then they're going to the cinema, probably McDonald's and other nefarious places. I keep saying she's a bad influence on him, but he thinks she's the best person in the whole world.
She is, Steve said.
Carol laughed.
I'll get used to the relationships. You live with Hermia, Steve?
I do. Chased her for years and finally caught her. Not before somebody chucked her over a balcony, unfortunately, but I've caught her now.
And you'll meet my better half later this morning because she's calling in.
She's dealing with a burglary along this service road.
Elise's house? I heard she'd been burgled. They're all OK, though.
They are, but I know Karen is concerned Elise might take matters into her own hands. She's DS Karen Nelson, by the way. I've asked Herms to call in at some point today to meet you.